Okay, so we'll be starting. Today's topic is subarachnoid hemorrhage. It's the ESV-ICM weekly classes. We'll try to wrap up with this in 30 minutes. So our discussion will be a different practical-oriented approach. When a patient comes to you, how will you manage? What are the causes? What things you need to focus on? So we'll go like that. But before that, what is subarachnoid hemorrhage? So basically, subarachnoid hemorrhage happens bleeding in the subarachnoid space. There are three layers of the brain: pia mater, arachnoid membrane, and dura mater. So in the arachnoid space, there is a hemorrhage. The hemorrhage may progress to intracerebral compartments or intraventricular compartments. That is not an issue, but there should be a bleed in the subarachnoid hemorrhage. Now, what are the risk factors for subarachnoid hemorrhage? Before going into the presentation of those avoidable risk factors are smoking. Smoking is very much correlated with subarachnoid hemorrhage. So preventable risk factor, suppose if a patient has a family history of subarachnoid hemorrhage in his family or her family, they should avoid smoking. Then you also have alcohol related to this. I have jotted down the points so that I don't miss something which needs to be told to you. So other one is alcohol. One more thing which is a matter of confusion is genetic relation. Many people feel that it's genetically correlated. You should always get a family screening done in a particular family. But genetics is not that so much common. But yes, the risk factors are common. If you family history of hypertension, history of PCOD. PCOD is also related with subarachnoid aneurysms. Also, estrogen deficiency. So women post menopausal becomes at high risk of developing subarachnoid hemorrhage. So this is the short about the risk factors. Now, how will the patient present to you in the emergency or ICU who is having subarachnoid hemorrhage? The classical symptom of subarachnoid hemorrhage is headache. The patient will describe this as a worst headache of his life, thunderclap headache, worst headache of his life. And this is usually of acute onset. This is usually of acute onset. Some patient feels that it is triggered by some stress or some emotional stress or hypertension, but usually it is untriggered. It can happen in most of the subarachnoid hemorrhage happens in the sleep hours. So the patient will present to you with severe headache. If the patient may come to you directly as a dead person, broad dead also, but usually the clinical symptom is headache. And what are the associated features with this headache? Peculiar ones is the patient may have vomitings because of raised ICP. The patient may have vomitings. Also, you can find neck stiffness. Neck stiffness is one of the non-infectious cause of meningismus. That's why you need to keep this in mind. This patient can have neck stiffness. Seizure. If you are a patient of SAH has seizure on presentation, then it's a bad prognostic. It's a predictor of poor outcome. It's a poor outcome predictor. So seizure on presentation in a SAH patient, not a good sign. Now, usually these headaches are sudden onset, within 1 hour onset or 2 hour onset. But can they present with some prodromal signs which you can feel that this patient has a warning sign before this headache? Usually no, but some patients may have few weeks before sentinel headache types. So it could be due to a change there's something in the aneurysmal per se, some dissection or some increase in the size of thrombus, but usually there could be a minor bleed, very, very minor bleed. This happens, it can happen few weeks before, but usually it doesn't happen. So your patient usually presents with sudden headache. So prodromal symptoms are few. These risk factors we have discussed in the presentation, and usually not triggered. It's usually not triggered. Now, when your patient has presented to you in the ER that having a very severe headache of his life, and then you suspected that, oh, this is most likely it's an SAH, because there is, like, I am finding vomitings also, and meningismal sign is also present. So what's the next step? So next step is, you should think in your mind that subarachnoid hemorrhage, first I should grade this patient, whether it's mild, moderate, severe. So the different scaling systems are there, but I would recommend you WFNS scaling. It's World Federation of Neurosurgeons scaling. What happens in this is, in this scale, there are, one is GCS and the other one is the neurodeficit. So it is scaled up to 1 to 5. So you need to calculate the GCS of the patient, and also need to see whether your patient has neurodeficit or not. So your patient can have a GCS of 13, 14, but having a deficit on the right side. So the worst thing should be calculated. So it will not fall into grade 1 or 2. It will fall on scale 3. So suppose your patient can be conscious oriented but having a hemiplegia. So it will come into grade 3. Why it is important? Because the surgical decisions and the outcome you need to explain to the patient. That's the thing. So patient came with a severe headache, you suspected SH, identify the grading, and then what you need to do is, how will you proceed? One thing is, you side by side start stabilizing the patient, maintain some parameters which will be discussed later on, and secondly is the investigation. So first thing which you need to investigate is do a CT scan brain. CT scan brain plane, it gets done very fastly, and this is the treatment modality of choice which you should do. So now you have a patient and you have sent to the CT scan, and then you identified that this is a subarachnoid hemorrhage. Now, what you need to see in CT? CT, there are 2-3 things. I will share with you a chart later on the forums, where the presence of blood in certain compartments can tell you what clinical signs this patient can present. If the particular blood is there in this fissure, it can present with third nerve palsy. It can present with posterior circulation signs, brainstem signs. So that is different. But important is, you need to identify that this patient is having subarachnoid hemorrhage. That's most important. At times, it is possible, if your patient is in scale 1 or 2, you may not find anything in CT scan. It's quite possible that if the scan is done timely, even though you cannot find subarachnoid hemorrhage in the CT. So what usually they tell is lumbar puncture. The LP should be done to confirm whether it was subarachnoid hemorrhage or not. So how the LP will help? In lumbar puncture, first there will be high opening pressure. Secondly, the RBCs will be there, because there is a bleed in the subarachnoid space. There will be RBCs, and then xanthochromia. Now RBCs, you need to differentiate between a traumatic type and a subarachnoid hemorrhage type. In subarachnoid hemorrhage, what happens? There is a bleed. So if you collect in the 4 or 5 tubes also, the bleed will be there in the first tube also, and in the blood will be there in the 5th tube also. While in traumatic lumbar puncture, initially the RBCs comes in your sample, and as you progress in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th tube, the RBCs component decrease. Now, thirdly, xanthochromia. Xanthochromia basically is your RBCs break down into oxyhemoglobin, then methemoglobin, and then bilirubin. Now, these takes time, and it usually is comes in the CSF usually after 6 hours. So LP will not give you acute diagnosis. Now, what they have said that if you are strongly suspecting SAH and your CT scan is normal, you should go for CT angio, CT brain angio. This will identify your aneurysm. Why we are telling today, we are discussing only the aneurysmal subarachnoid hemorrhage, secular aneurysm, because 80-90% of the subarachnoid hemorrhage are due to the aneurysmal bleed only. So CT brain angio is the treatment modality which you should go if you are not finding SH in the initial scan. There is a crux here. Suppose if I say you, okay, I have found a SH in SH in the CT scan plane. So now I should go for CT pulmonary angio. So now I should go for CT pulmonary, CT brain angio, or just hold on, call from. So I was telling, suppose you have identified a subarachnoid hemorrhage on the CT brain plane, and now will you go for CT brain angio on this, or will you not go? So what they say that, I'm sorry for the disturbance outside, but we have to bear with that. It will be hardly for 1 or 2 minutes. So digital subtraction angiography, DSA, what we call it. Now they say that DSA has got a more better anatomical and clear images of the vessels and identify aneurysms more in a better way. That's why if your center has DSA, you should go for DSA. But the problem with DSA is sometimes pick very little aneurysm which are of no significance. So if your initial scan shows SH, fine. Then stabilize the patient and go for DSA. If your CT scan is not showing your subarachnoid hemorrhage, go for CT brain angio so that you can identify that this patient is having aneurysm and it could have minor bleed. So that's the treatment modality which we have discussed. Headache, patient presenting with like a headache, you suspected on the basis of symptoms, you did immediate CT scan brain and then SOS CT brain angio or DSA after stabilizing. Now I have discussed xanthochromia and RBCs in the CSF. Now, and also grading, WNS grading. Non-aneurysmal bleed are only of 50 to 20%, so we'll not discuss that. That's some different class. Now, how will you manage? Now comes the treatment part. How will you manage? You have a SH patient, you identified, you have confirmed that it's an SH. Now, what needs to be done? The first thing is, any patient in the emergency in ICU, always take care of the ABC. Always take care of the airway, breathing, and circulation needs to be taken care of. If your patient is in GCS less than 8, you should go for airway protection, and you should, whatever rest is required, you need to do. Now, important thing is blood pressure. In this particular SOH, bleeding blood pressure maintenance is important. Ideally, whatever in books is written to maintain the blood pressure targets are post-treatment, whether when you will go for coiling and clipping, after that is the treatment. But initially, you need to also focus on blood pressure. What happens is cerebral perfusion pressure is basically MAP minus ICP. So if you decrease the MAP, mean arterial pressure, what will happen? The CPP will decrease, means cerebral perfusion pressure will decrease. So there are high chances of getting infarct in the brain. So don't decrease the blood pressure too much. If you allow the BP to shoot, then it can rebleed, it can cause rebleed. So that's why important is you maintain blood pressure somewhere around 140. The guidelines say it should be less than systolic blood pressure should be less than 160, and the MAP should be less than 110. So ideally, you should keep blood pressure somewhere around 140, 150. It's an optimal balance between prevention of rebleed and also as well as not getting infarct. So what are the modalities which will use to control the blood pressure? Labetalol, or you can use enalapril. You can use that. Don't use NTG or nitroprusside. What happens? Nitroprusside or NTG, what they will do? They cause vasodilation, venodilation, and then can increase the ICP. So, any neuro patient, if you need to control blood pressure, use enalapril or labetalol. Labetalol being the drug of choice. Of course, you need to monitor for the bradycardia, but labetalol doesn't hamper that heart rate that much, so that it can help. It's the treatment drug of choice for controlling the blood pressure. So now you have stabilized the ABC, you have focused on your blood pressure. Now, next thing what you will do is you need to anticipate the complication, and your treatment part will move accordingly. What are the complications you can have? So the complication which you can have is rebleed. Rebleed chances are very much high in the first 3 hours and in the first 3 days. So SH patient means the aneurysm which has got ruptured can rebleed in the first 3 hours very nicely, very high proportion, and also can rebleed in the next 3 days. So this is the immediate complication. That's why the definitive treatment is either you should go for coiling or clipping. It should be done as early as possible. So try all your efforts to get this surgery done, whether it's coiling or clipping. That needs to be done. One more thing. So, surgery is the definitive therapy. Now, what are the complications can occur? So coiling and clipping will depend on your neurosurgical team decision, whether coiling would be better in this particular patient or clipping would be better, and also the finances involved and the attendants will. Now we have discussed the complication. You have brought the patient to the ICU. You have diagnosed SAH. You have started maintaining, controlling the blood pressure. Now one more thing in blood pressure. Suppose the BP is low, what you will do? So you need to maintain systolic blood pressure somewhere around 140, 150. So suppose it was high, you control with a labetalol. If it is low, fluid resuscitate the patient. If your patient has certain cardiac issue also, and you think you cannot give lots of fluids, then you can take noradrenaline or any vasopressors or dobutamine also to maintain the perfusion, systolic blood pressure somewhere around 140. That is very important. Otherwise, your patient will land in infarct. And also coming to the next complication is vasospasm. Vasospasm is a very deadly combination, and the peak effects, it starts from the risk start from the 3rd day to 21st day, and the peak risk is somewhere around 7th to 8th day. So vasospasm prevention is very much important. Hydration is a crucial part of it. So what you will do to prevent the vasospasm, you need to start nimodipine. Nimodipine is the only agent which through multiple actions is found to be effective in preventing the vasospasm. It helps on certain vessels which are not microvessels, which are not visible on the angiography or DSA. Start nimodipine. The dose of nimodipine is very important. You people should most of the time write nimodipine 60 mg 6 hourly, but ideal dose is 60 mg 4 hourly. Is the time. There can be fall in the blood pressure, so you manage the blood pressure with other agents, fluid and noradrenaline. Other thing which you need to consider is sugars control. Hyperglycemia needs to be taken care of. Hyperglycemia directly impact the prognosis. Other complication is hyponatremia. Hyponatremia, SAH, one of the cause of hyponatremia, because there is a different. It affects the hypothalamus. So the SIADH, antidiuretic hormone axis means it gets affected. So your patient can have both SIADH or cerebral salt wasting syndrome. You need to differentiate between the two. That's a separate topic, but I'll give you a few points. In SIADH, antidiuretic hormone is secreted more, so your urine will be too much concentrated. The fluid will accumulate in the body, and that's why your sodium will go down. In cerebral salt wasting, your kidney is throwing lots of amount of salt, and that's why along with the water, patient will not be fluid overload, but it will be hyponatremic. That you need to see. So you have managed the patient in terms of blood pressure. You have managed the given call to neurosurgical team. You have graded the patient. You have taken care of sugars. You can taken care of what we call is hyponatremia. One more thing you need to take care of is seizure prophylaxis. This is controversial. Some people say that seizure prophylaxis should be given. Some say should not be given. But benefiting the risk, if the patient develops seizure, then the patient's outcome get worsened. So it's better to start with a seizure prophylaxis. Whatever the drug you people are comfortable with, usually with levetiracetam. it works nicely. So we use that. So it can be given. Now, DVT prophylaxis, you can use DVT pump. Now, suppose the resident say that we are going for surgery, but this patient was on antiplatelets. So, based on your surgical team experience and their what you call their preference, you can transfuse one or two platelets to this patient. But if the patient is on anticoagulants, you need to reverse it with FFP plasma, fresh frozen plasma. You need to reverse that with plasma. That should be in your mind, because this patient can rebleed and this patient is anyway going into the surgery. So these are the complications which are there. Mind you, vasospasm peaks at around 7 to 8. Then how it will present? Usually with a fall in the GCS, and there should be a focal deficit. Vasospasm doesn't happen in the whole brain all of a sudden. It happens in a particular territory, and that territory gets affected. So you need to take care of that. How will you monitor that your patient is landing in vasospasm? So some centers use transcranial sonography to see the velocity of the vessels. If the velocity of the vessels is increasing, that means it is getting vasospasm, and then the blood flow is increasing. So that's the way. So we have discussed the complications, we have discussed the management. Fluid therapy and maintaining MAP is very, very important. It needs to be taken care of. Why we are discussing this topic on priority? Because mortality and prognosis is very bad in such patients, and it's related to one, the amount of blood which you have seen in the CT. Second, age. Earlier the younger the patient, bad is the prognosis, and your grade at which the patient presented. So these are some of the points. I think I had covered up most of the things. Nothing is left. Okay, so now I'll open up for questions. We'll have 5 minutes more. I'll open up for anybody can ask any question right now.
Hello.
Haji, yes.
One thing I want to make it clear, so what are the criteria to check it out? Whether we have to do coiling or clipping. I think it is specific some area bounded things.
See, very, very valid point raised by Dr. Rohit. See, what happens? You have a aneurysm with the neck. There is a vessel, and then in the vessel there is an aneurysm pops up, and there is a neck of the aneurysm. If the neck is very good, if there is a neck is very narrow and aneurysm is huge, it can be easily clipped. So usually surgeons go for clipping in that particular thing. But if aneurysm is wide, open, neck is very wide, they go for coiling. Also, in which vessel the aneurysm is there, surgically which vessel they can approach easily. If they can easily approach, usually in MCA territory, they approach easily. So if it is approachable, what is the direction of this aneurysm? In which direction it is popping out? So all these things the neurosurgeons and the coiling team discusses and then give the best possible action. But in general, aneurysm with a wide neck is good for coiling. Aneurysm with a narrow neck is good for clipping. And there are chances of rebleed even in such patient, a very low chance, but during 1 year, it can recur. I hope I had clarified, Rohit sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Very nice. And one more thing I want to know, I have seen many patients in our institute, we left aneurysm as such without operating it. So
then it's a huge risk for the patient. They can bleed, they cannot bleed, but it depends upon the patient luck, pure luck. As a medical, as an intensivist, and you should always give an option to coil or surgically treat the patient.
Okay.
1% nimodipine, 60 mg, 4 hourly. Then it should be given in tablet forms. Tablet form still preferred for nimodipine. IV form is available. but it should be given with meticulous calculation and monitoring, because complications with nimodipine as an IV are more than your oral drug. Don't decrease the dose of nimodipine. Surgeons and some teams decrease the dose of nimodipine because it creates a fall in blood pressure, but rather you continue with the dose of nimodipine, especially in the first week, first 10 days. You maintain the blood pressure by NORAD or any other blood pressure or fluid resuscitation.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much.
Any other question? So I think that was in short. You should read this right now from Washington Manual of Critical Care or Rose Intensive Care Manual. So whatever points we have discussed are all there in it. So from next time, whenever you see a patient with a severe headache, worse headache, always suspect SAH. There can be a neck rigidity. There can be vomiting associated with it. Grade the patient into NFH, WFNS scale 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Go for a urgent CT scan brain after stabilizing ABC. If your scan is normal, you can go CT brain angio, or you can plan LLP, but CT brain angio is a better choice. Then during stabilization, airways within controlation, maintain the MAP somewhere around 140, less than 110, and systolic blood pressure around 140. If it is high, you can control it with labetalol or enalapril. If it is low, you fluid resuscitate and take vasopressors. For the cardiac patient, you still take a vasopressors. Then offer the surgical treatment, because rebleeding risk is very much high in the first 3 days. Add nimodipine to prevent the vasospasm. Control sugars, control sodium, give seizure prophylaxis, give DVT prophylaxis. If there is a patient is on antiplatelet, you may or may not give antiplatelet, but if the patient is on antithrombotic anticoagulation, you should give fresh frozen plasma. That's the thing. And also, you should give an option to screen the family also, family members also. They can also have a risk. Then on discharge, you should always tell, avoid smoking, avoid alcohol. These are the preventable risks. Control blood pressure, and female should also go for evaluation of PCOD, and menstrual post-menopausal patients can also have this hormonal therapy. So this was in short about SAH, and we'll upload this recording on the channel today itself. We'll give a forum link also where you people can discuss or ask any doubt. I'm thankful to all of you who have joined, and we'll be bringing more classes, at least 2 per week from now on. We are trying to do that so that we can cover maximum topics of critical care, intensive care in 6 months, including the practical sessions also. Thank you.